Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up, and today I have for you a quick and simple technique that is a great way to use up scraps of designer series paper and cardstock. This is called the pinwheel technique. If you are a quilter, it probably tickles your fancy because it definitely looks like a quilt block. And it probably isn't as complicated to make as you might think. There are a few little pieces you have to finesse, but if you pay attention and remember what I said with the tips and tricks, you will have it down with no problem at all. So we will go ahead and get started. The first thing you will need is a card base. This is a piece of petal pink. It is 8.5 by 5.5, scored right down the middle at 4 1/4. So I'm going to fold that in half and then set it to the side. And we'll go ahead and start building our pinwheel first. We'll get the hard part out of the way. And then I'll show you how to assemble your card. So for the pinwheel, you can start with a 3-inch square of cardstock. This is real red. And then I have 2 squares of pumpkin pie, which are 2 5/8 of an inch square. So the first step is to layer these 2 pieces together. Basically, we're going to have them offset so that you have a shape that looks like this. Now, if you want to get really technical, you can get either grid paper or a ruler and assemble them that way. What I like to do, because I'm not quite that technical, I put adhesive on the center of one of the squares. I will say the first time I put this together, I totally outlined the edges and then I had adhesive overlapping on my corners, which I didn't really need. So just be mindful of that as you're putting it together. So I have one piece laid out square. This one I'm going to hold like a diamond, and what I do is I hold it up away from the paper until I am happy with my eyeballing job, and I like to make sure my corners look as equal as possible. So hopefully that makes sense. And then once I feel like they're all the way equal, I usually have to bring it up a little bit to make them equal. The more centered and equal this is, the easier your life will be when you put it together. All right, so I'm going to call that good. Give that a press down. Now it is up to you if you want to glue your pinwheel base, I'll call it, onto your 3-inch layer now, or if you want to wait. I'll go ahead and layer that together now so that you can see a little bit better as I work on the next steps. But as I said, you do not have to do that now. It is totally up to you. And so just layer the squares together. Next, you will need 8 pieces of designer series paper that are 1 1/4 inch square. So you're going to have 4 of print A and 4 of print B. So pick 2 papers that go together. And basically what we're going to be doing is layering them together to form the pinwheel. Now the very first piece is the most important piece, and if you listen to anything in the whole video, this is it, because this will make or break your pinwheel. And I say that because the very first pinwheel I attempted, even though I kind of knew what I was doing, I'd watched some other demonstrators, I still screwed it up. So that's why I'm saying listen to what I say so that you don't mess up your first pinwheel. When you are selecting your first piece of paper, and we're going to start layering it up here on the top triangle, the most important thing is to watch where you put your glue. You want to put glue over here just a little bit on this corner, because when we come around and do our pinwheel shape, we need to finesse a piece here at the very end, so we have to be able to lift this paper up. So you only want to anchor it on one side. You can use liquid glue for this. I like to use liquid glue. It's a little more forgiving. It doesn't dry instantly like my tape runner, so I have a little more time to play. So I'm just using a little bit of glue there. You can also, if you want, take a glue dot or two small ones and put them over here on this corner, and that will help you anchor as well and still give you the flexibility you need. Now you will need to leave yourself a border, but you need a very small one. So if you're familiar with card making, typically we're doing like 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch. You want very, very narrow. So there's the first one. Now for the rest of your shapes, it does not matter where you put your glue. You can put glue on the whole thing. So I'm going to grab a couple of these squares. We're going to be putting glue on all of them. And a little glue goes a long way. You don't want big thick lines of glue because you don't want glue squirting out or squeezing out all over your project. So, all right. So take your second square, your other print, and what you're going to do is you're going to be lining this one up with the square corner. So the first one we use that triangle. The second one we're going to use the square, and you want to do your best to keep your border the same and line your pieces up here in the middle as best you can. The more straight one these pieces are here in the middle, the easier your final steps will be. So, and I can tell I'm already a little bit off, but I think it's actually going to work. It's off, but in a good way. So the more lined up you are here with your pieces, the better. And I will say, if there was another place where I was going to mess up, it was here, because I don't know why, but I put this piece here on the diagonal, and this one I always wanted to put here at the bottom, and that's not where it goes. It goes here at the bottom on the square. But if you'll see, I want these lined up as much as possible and these two lined up as much as possible. So you're just going to continue along with your squares. Matching them up on your corners until you are finished. So we are nearly there, and I will show you why you want them to be as lined up as possible. Now when we get down to the final two squares, you want as little overlap here as possible between the square I'm going to put down and this one, because, and I actually have just a little bit of a gap there, which is going to work to my advantage. But you want them lined up as best you can, because for this last square, what we're going to do is we have to lift this one up. That's why it was so important to watch that glue placement at the beginning, because we're going to tuck this last green square right underneath here. And so if you have overlap, you'll have to fight it. That's what really happened to me my first time, and it ended up really being a disaster. So my second attempt went much better. But if you put the glue where I showed you over here on this panel, and then you line them up as best you can in the center, you'll be able to position that last piece with relative ease. And then all you have to do is go back to this first one and see how I can still lift it up. Take a little more glue and glue underneath that flap and press that down, and then you have your pinwheel shape. Now this one, since it was off a little bit, if you have it perfect and spot on, you might not need to cover the center. You might just be happy with your pinwheel the way it is. I'm going to show you in a moment how we're going to cover up the center, just to hide if you don't have it lined up quite perfectly. So I'm going to set that to the side, just let that glue dry, and work on my card front. So I've got my petal pink base, and I have a Flirty Flamingo panel. This is 5 1/4 by 4, and I'll have to show you. I really went outside my comfort zone with the colors, but I pulled them out completely from the designer series paper. So the Flirty Flamingo is here, the Real Red, the Pumpkin Pie, even the Granny Apple Green, all came from the designer series paper. I wasn't sure how it was going to come out, but I really like the finished look. So back to the colors. My greeting I'm going to do in Pacific Point, because I'm pulling it out of that blue that's here in the card. Now my front greeting for the outside of the card is from the Sweet Ice Cream stamp set. And just something to keep in mind as you are stamping your greeting, you want something that's one line or no more than 2 narrow lines. If you use something too tall, it's going to disappear behind your pinwheel shape here. And obviously you don't want that to happen. So if you have 2 narrow lines, it would work, or else one nice size greeting sentiment on the front is good. And while I have my stamp pad out, I'm going to stamp the inside. Now for the inside, I'm going to accent it with strips of Designer Series paper to match the front. I'm not going to glue them down yet because if I goof up with my stamping, which I'm prone to do, I'm not wasting the whole panel of paper. So there we go. I'll come back and glue that in just a minute. Put my ink pad away before I do any damage. So, a little adhesive, and for this you can use liquid glue, or I am a tape runner girl, so it was almost hard for me to use liquid glue on that pinwheel, but it works the best. So here is our panel glued to the front of the card. Now for your pinwheel, you can either glue it flat to the front or you can add it to your card with dimensionals. I have some large dimensionals here, and I just ran out, so a tip or trick that I learned years ago is I don't like to waste any of the edges. I cut them apart with scissors, and I use every little piece till the whole thing is gone. So peel the backing off my dimensionals. Oop. And then when you put this on the card, you want to have your point to the top. If you try to turn it so you're putting down a diamond instead of a square, it's too large for your card, at least if you use the 3-inch layer. So for this one, it has to go this way. Otherwise, it won't fit. So there is that. Now, I want to cover up the center because I have just a little bit of space there that I don't want to be seen. So I have pre-cut a real red shape. This is from the Tasteful Labels die set that we have. And if you aren't familiar with that and want to see it, you can check out my website. Or if you don't have a demonstrator you are currently working with and you would like to see a copy of the catalog, just reach out to me, either in the comments here or pop on over to Facebook at The Faithful Stamper and contact me there, and I'll be happy to send you a catalog. So I put small dimensionals on the back to make sure this is nice and even and not too wobbly. And this looks cute, and I could leave it just like that, but I want to give it one more little accent. So I'm going to make a little double bow with some baker's twine. Doubling the bow just gives it a different look. So it takes a little finesse. I'm not the best at bow tying, but I'm just doubled my width of twine or length of twine and tied my bow. And then my bow has 2 loops instead of 1. That was almost too easy. It's never that easy for me. Trim my edges, and now I have a sweet little bow. And to glue this to the front of the card, I'm going to use a glue dot, but before I do anything, I'm going to roll the glue dot a little bit because otherwise it would show behind my twine bow. Everything is sticking to my fingers today. And just like that, there's the front of my card is complete. And then I'm going to go back to my glue for just a minute and do a nice thin layer of glue on my matching Designer Series paper strips. Oh, goodness. And I'm going to glue these at the top and the bottom of my insert. And then I'm going to leave this sit for just 1 minute to dry while I show you how I'm going to finish off my envelope. There is no matching stamp set specifically for this paper that I used. It was 2 pieces from the Hostess pack of paper that we have in the back of our catalog. So I decided I'm going to decorate my envelope flap with matching paper. So to do that, I simply open my envelope, grab my adhesive, make sure I don't go over the edge of the envelope flap, and then missed some in the middle there. I like to make sure I have enough that everything is going to stick and the paper's not going to peel. I line up one corner at the top edge there and press my paper down, flip it over, and then all I have to do is trim the excess paper off. And then I have a beautifully coordinated envelope to go with my project. So just a little simple tip for you. I always like to have some kind of decoration on my envelopes, whether it be an embossed panel or a piece of designer series paper or a stamped image. So there we go. One last thing to glue the insert in the card. Let's see, which one is it? This one. And just like that, I have a beautiful card that came together pretty simply, just a little bit of finesse with some paper, and it's a great way to use up scraps of cardstock and designer series paper. So I have a couple of samples to show you. So here is obviously the card we just made using alternating pieces of designer series paper. I have another example here using a different paper. This is using our Sweet as a Peach paper, and a different happy birthday here at the bottom. Now, the first card here, I use that larger circle to cover the middle, but you don't have to go nearly so large. You can keep it small and simple with just a single pearl or another kind of embellishment. And then this one just has a stamped insert. Next, these two cards that I just showed you had the alternating 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, you're not tied into that. You can use 4 different prints of designer series paper. And for this one, I used our pansy paper. And you still need 8 squares, just 2 of each print instead of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then repeat 1, 2, 3, 4. And I really like how this came together. I used a small punch circle and then one of our bumblebee trinkets for the center point there. An accent of designer series paper to go along with my message. Now you are also not tied into designer series paper for your pinwheel. You could very easily switch to cardstock. For example, this card has 4 colors of cardstock. I could have easily used 2 as well. And this one I was going to make a masculine birthday card, but I opted for the Happy Fall, y'all. And then I left the 3-inch square off of this one. I just used those 2 5/8 of an inch squares offset to create my pinwheel. For the inside, just a couple stamped images to keep that fall theme going. And a matching envelope, of course. Now, all the cards that I've shown you so far have used the vertical orientation on the card. But again, you're not tied into just that. You can turn your card sideways so it's horizontally oriented, and same technique. I just offset the pinwheel to one side and then stamped a greeting on a small die and layered it. And I popped my pinwheel with dimensionals and then tucked the label underneath. And I really like how that works, and I don't know if you can see very well, but I embossed this panel. Instead of stamping directly on it, I embossed it and then used the tag for my greeting. And then here is the inside of this little Christmas card. And I kind of like the non-traditional colors there too. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make our quick and simple pinwheel technique. And as I said, it's a great way to use up scraps of designer series paper and cardstock. I'd love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can see all the crafting videos that I post. I typically post new videos twice a week, and you can also hop over to Facebook and find me at The Faithful Stamper, and I do live videos there twice a week as well. Thank you so much for watching. Happy crafting!